Merepeka Raukawa-Tait 20 years ago would have been, I imagine, on everybody's list for standing for political office. I'm sure the National Party would have loved to have her, the Labour Party. She was a very, very prominent, not so much politician, but an activist, and somebody who had a clear social conscience, articulate, and to be perfectly honest with you, quite assertive. And that combination would have made her very attractive. But she stuck at her job and now is on a list, and it's a list for Te Pāti Māori at this coming election, and she joins us now. Merepeka, lovely to have you on the show. Do you remember giving that speech at Invercargill?
Kia ora, Michael. Absolutely I do. And my God, is that a blast from the past? My goodness. It certainly is many, many years ago. And you're right, it probably would be about 20 years ago. And I must say, at that stage too, I was very impressed with Invercargill, believe it or not. So, yes, a long time ago.
I made the mistake in my speech of saying that Invercargill was about 5. And I said, God, it's warmer in my... I opened my mouth out loud. It's warmer in my fridge than it is in Invercargill. That did not go down well.
No, well, they're quite parochial, aren't they?
Yeah, they certainly are. But that was the New Zealand, I think, Rotary conference that you gave. And you were the bee's knees. You were the go-to person and things like that. What have you done since then? Can I just ask, why did you leave Women's Refuge? Because to be perfectly honest with you, you were the face and shape. You were outstanding in that particular job at advancing the cause. Why did you leave?
Well, I came in there. They wanted to, I did a report for them to restructure the organisation. And then I thought, oh, my God, this is going to get me into trouble because there's things that you need to say. And, we either take domestic violence seriously or we just suck it up and say, well, that's the future of our country, which would have been basically going down the tubes, particularly in terms of the safety of our women and children. But you can only say that message for so long, and then somebody else has to pick it up. I suppose you could say, Michael, that I was the disruptor, and then somebody else has to pick it up and start to embed the changes that need to happen. So I took the opportunity to certainly to have a crack, and that's probably exactly what I did do, at our Māori leaders, at the politicians, fund organisations like Women's Refuge to be successful, and also I wanted our whānau to know that they have a major role in keeping our women and children safe. But as I say, you can only say that message for so long, and then after a while, people seem to think, oh, there she goes, banging on again. And so I took the opportunity to strike while the iron was hot and then to move on.
You are a political creature, though. I mean, you've been round the houses in some ways in terms of the last 20 years as a politician. Has it always been your desire to be in Parliament?
When I was younger, I had thought about that. I really did. And, honestly, I looked at some of the people who were there and I thought, God, if this was my business, you wouldn't even get a foot in the bloody door. It's because it's all very well having nice people there, but nice people so often do not have the fearlessness that's required when significant change is needed for our country. So, but as I say, that was then, and then I went on to work in other areas, and I still felt I was adding value through the work that I was doing. But you did say something before, Michael, and you thought, well, maybe I could have been a politician. Did you know, over the years, not one political party actually asked me, apart from Māori Pāti, to stand. So that was a bit of, I must say Christian Heritage, which was the kiss of bloody death, no doubt about that, for my political aspirations. How naive of me to think that the Christian Heritage Party was the only party of family values and Christian values, because in every political party there are good people, who have family values and Christian values. So that was rather naive of me. But no, the major parties have never asked me, and I didn't really bother about heading that way. I thought if there's a time, it'll come, all in good time.
Nevertheless, you're talking about that. We were just talking about the 2002 elections in actual fact, because National did so badly in that elections in 2002. You were the deputy leader, as you say, of the Christian Heritage Party. You actually did quite well. I think you got almost 20% of the vote in the Wairarapa electorate. Georgina Bayer got elected. But Graham Capel was then obviously the leader of the party. Did you see anything in him this is 20 years ago, so I mean, the benefit of hindsight. Did you see anything in him that would have eventually suggested the man who stood before the High Court in Christchurch and in prison for his crimes?
Hell no, Michael. God, I mean, when I think of it now, it's quite unbelievable that I didn't pick up anything. But of course, people who have those inclinations, they are very, very good at masking. They are very good at hiding. They certainly don't do anything out in the broad daylight. So no, and that was. I've often questioned myself. I've often really thought to myself, come on, you should have been able to pick up on some behaviour, but I never did. And I have to be honest, Michael, I wasn't even looking for it. Well, who does? Who does look for it? But that was, no, I have often thought, surely to goodness, there must have been something. But no, I was certainly blindsided by that, that's for sure.
I actually got arrested by the police to do with that, because inadvertently I was speculating when I was on Radio Live, Merepeka, was speculating as to who the victims might have been from the press reports. And unfortunately, my deductions proved to be completely correct. And some policeman was listening to my show on Radio Live at the time, and the next thing I'm being arrested and charged for contempt of court. So I remember Graham Capel pretty well.
Being arrested for having good insight and good analysis.
Well, just putting two together from media reports. But there you go. Well. Yeah. Now moving on, you have joined Te Pāti Māori though. You are you were 8 last time on the list. You're 9 now. So, I mean, on a good day with the wind behind you and given some of the polls, you could be elected to Parliament. Can I ask why? Now, you said something right at the start of this conversation. And I remember you pointing the finger at Māori leaders and saying, hey, hang on. A lot of these victims of crime are Māori women and Māori kids. You need to do something. And you were very clear about that 20 years ago. 20 years later, you're standing for Te Pāti Māori. Same message?
Well, the same message is, but of course, when you look at some of the backgrounds, and not just of the children, I have to say, we're talking about the intergenerational violence that has gone on. We're talking about the children and even the grandparents and parents who've been in state care and the violence that was meted out to them. So, I've had to learn, and I give credit to my late husband, Theo Tait, who was Tūhoi and Te Arawa, and I give credit to his quiet wisdom and his wanting me to understand why people are the way they are. No excuse for some of the behaviours, absolutely not. But there's usually things that have happened to people that actually turns them into what we sometimes see today. And so for me right now, I actually believe that if we don't turn around some of the behaviours, some of where our Māori in particular, where they are at present, if we don't turn that around, I don't think we've got a stunning future ahead of us as a country. I'm really very, very concerned.
No, listen, I would agree with you 100%, and I'm a conservative. So why the vehicle of Te Pāti Māori to make that happen? Because, and forgive me, but from an outsider's point of view, and as a white conservative male, when I see Rawiri Waititi and Debbie Merepeka, I sort of get the feeling that I'm responsible for many of the ills that have been inflicted upon Māoridom, or that's the attempt I get. Have I got a false perception?
Well, I think you have to a certain extent. What they keep highlighting is that they go back into the history of our country and they look at the thing, why we are the way we are, why we've got these systems embedded in New Zealand that have not served Māori and Pacifica whānau well. We haven't had the fearless leadership to say, listen, we need to do something different 50 years ago because the results are absolutely abysmal. And so what they are signalling is we shouldn't be in this position. We needn't have been in this position if we had have had good decisions made that actually could have put the families at the centre. But we don't do that in New Zealand. We just struggle. What would you call it? We just sort of plod along rather, and think, keep our fingers crossed and think, oh, well, it'll all come right in the wash. Well, it won't come right in the wash. And so we've got to make sure that everybody understands what's at stake. Now, the Māori leaders, and you're talking about Rawiri and Debbie, they know what's at stake. They know that if things don't get better, we're going to have the next intergenerational young people going into the institutions, going into the criminal justice system, and being of no bloody good use to anybody. So that's why they're saying we've got to turn it around. But they are aware of the past, and so often things from the past shape where we are right now. But I say that we can't allow the past to determine our future. Learn from it. Absolutely learn from it, but make sure that we are building a better future by saying, let's live in the present, being aware of the past, but focus on a bright future. And that's the message now.
Well, I'd love to get that message from Te Pāti Māori, but I guess I'm not, except I'm getting it from you now. Maybe, you're the useful counterbalance there. Can I ask, though, what are the policies that you or that Te Pāti Māori would implement that would arrest that kind of issue? So I'm looking at serious Māori educational underachievement. I'm looking at, obviously, a vast over-reliance upon welfare. I'm looking at too many Māori incarcerated in our prisons. And I'm also watching the rise of gangs in this country and the disproportion of young Māori who are entering those gangs. How are you going to arrest that kind of, well, it almost seems cultural decline?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's the thing that we've got to fix. We've got to really respond to. What I say and what the party is saying now, we have to be absolutely fixated on lifting our whānau up. We have to say to them that this is not as good as it gets. We've got young people who actually believe that where they are right now that's going to be it. Well, it can't be. If you are a young person under the age of 24, if you're not in education, training or employment, then what the hell's your future going to be? And then if you're going to have children, well, we're just setting up the next generation to be parked up on the sideline. So there's got to be this self-belief. We have got to understand that we need to get off the dependency of the bloody social welfare system. I mean, if ever there's a government that talks about, well, let's have a review of the social welfare system, people throw up their arms and say, oh, but you can't do that, you can't do that. It's like they can't envision a life without being stuck on the social welfare tips. Well, goodness gracious, surely they've got to see past that. So there are leaders now that need to come forward and say to our whānau, we do have to get educated. We must make sure they're in homes that suit their situation. We've got to get them into jobs that allow them to be well paid so they can care for their families and make the decisions. And most of all, we need them to be healthy. And these are significant issues. So the policies that we want to see, whether it's removal of GST from food, whether it's looking at tax, and the inequality or the inequities in the tax system that we have in New Zealand, everything we've got to look at it to say, will this help Māori? Will this help the families who are most vulnerable? And if it's not, then we have to challenge and speak up and say, otherwise, it's just every year, big black hole, all the budget money is going into a big black hole, social welfare spend that really is not going to have any desirable outcome. And as taxpayers, we should all be jumping up and down about that.
Well, no. Listen, I agree with you. And I mean, I've been opining for 30-odd years about the fact that if Māori are not uplifted from their current position and status, then the economic and social future of this country is stuffed. And so you and I would agree on that. It's the question of how we actual fact do that. Can I ask you, Merepeka, the place of the Treaty of Treaty of Waitangi, where do you see that and the future you've talked about? Or is it, from my perspective, and if I was Winston Peters talking to you, he would say to you that the treaty is not the answer. He would say the answer is pretty much what you've just been espousing. Get educated, get into the Western world. You can be both Māori and, Western educated, and be proud of both. How do you see that solution and the position of Te Tiriti in 2023?
Well, the treaty is important, Michael, because the treaty guaranteed that all subjects in this in the country would be treated equally. Well, we've got this great disparity in New Zealand, so something's definitely wrong. If we've got Māori men dying on average 8 years earlier than non-Māori, then something's wrong. If our children don't come out with the same educational achievements as others, something is wrong. Now, we could say, well, that they're not interested. Well, that's not true, because we know when our children come through kohanga reo, through kura kaupapa, and they go to the wānanga, they absolutely excel. So maybe we should be looking at the educational system, the health system, labour force participation and all of those things, and saying, have they got the access that every other New Zealander has, or are there barriers? And if we would look at it like that, because the treaty did guarantee that we would be able to excel in the country of our ancestors, and that's not the case now. So we've got to be fearless. We've got to, if we hold the mirror up to ourselves as a nation and say, is this, what's the issue here? What's the issue here? And the political parties in Wellington, they're not particularly concerned for Māori. I mean, because otherwise we would have addressed some of these inequities and inequalities years ago, but we haven't. And so you've got to have someone who's on the floor of the House advocating all the time to say, let's look to see where the money is going. And if a portion of that is not going into uplift in terms of education, health, and other areas for Māori, then there's something wrong. And actually, it'll be the same old. And we can't have that.
Can I ask you, though, something that's confused me? It confuses me still. And I'm now an elected member of a regional council, for example, Merepeka. And that is, on the one hand, we talk about Māori, but as somebody who had a Ngāti Porou girlfriend who always used to say to me, Michael, there's Māori and then there's Ngāti Porou. So in other words, the concept of mana whenua, the idea that whichever iwi is in a particular area is representative of Māori. So for example, in my neck of the woods, which is Otago, Merepeka, we are finding that Māori are being pushed out, and that mana whenua, which is Ngaitahu, or Kaitahu as they call themselves down here, they say we are the treaty partner, not Māori per se. Do you accept that?
Well, that does cause issues all around the country. But mana whenua, of course, are those who own the tribal assets within the area. So we've got that here within Rotorua, within Te Aroha as well. We own our lakes, the geothermal. We also have our big farm holdings around here. So obviously when councils are making decisions that could impact on our land use, on the waterways, then we definitely want to have, as Mainua, we want to have the say. So that is really the difference. I mean, all Māori are important, and as all New Zealanders are, in terms of wanting a say in their local community, be it through the regional council or the local city council. But certainly where the natural resources are, it is mana whenua who will definitely want to say.
Okay. Finally, Merepeka, the issue of Māori's seats. Now, you're standing, I think, for the Rotorua general seat, is that right?
That's right, yes.
Right, and you've got, obviously, Māori Party representatives in 7 of the Māori seats. Every electorate, or every party that I can see, in fact, if there's one ethnicity that's over-represented in Parliament at the moment, I think there are 22 Māori or MPs who claim Māori heritage. Do we really need Māori seats now?
I think we do, because while you might have Māori in other political parties, some of them are there because they're on the list, and of course, but those parties, their core constituency, Michael, is not Māori. So then obviously, I know this from experience, and certainly on the council, my 11 years as councillor here in Rotorua, that the important issues for Māori usually are never given the same weight of consideration as non-Māori issues or Pākehā issues, if you want to put it like that. And so that's why the Māori Party, or such as the Māori Party, will always be necessary until such time as there is equality and the inequities are done away with. And so that's why they have to be there, because our lands are important, our waterways are important, We want to be at the table when those big discussions are being had. I mean, you go to Auckland in the summer, you can't even swim in most of the beaches up in Auckland now. And there's very few Māori are sitting around the table determining, the three waters, whether it's stormwater, drinking water, what's the other water? Wastewater. And so, these are really important issues. So Māori do want to have to say, and I think they need to be there at this point in time. There will come a day, hopefully, then when that won't be the case, that everybody is there for all New Zealanders. But right now, I don't believe that that's the case.
Finally, you started your public career as Chief Executive of Women's Refuge. And I've listened to your speech, and I referenced that speech that you gave, for example, at Invercargill to that Rotary conference a long, long time ago. I wonder how you reconcile the Māori Party's children's policy, or Mokopuna Māori policy, with what you said 20 years ago. Because one of the things, for example, you were very clear on 20 years ago was the capacity to protect children. It didn't matter what ethnicity, that was your job, protect children first. But now the Mokopuna Māori policy of Te Pāti Māori, for example, Merepeka, is about not allowing the state to uplift children from dangerous situations in which those children might rest and reside. Can you tell me how you reconcile those two differences?
Well, from my work with Women's Refuge, that's what I certainly saw, that in every whānau there is someone, usually an older person, oftentimes a grandparent, who will step up when there is an issue of safety for the children in the home. There is always someone. But so often, organisations, and the only organisation that really matters at this point is Oranga Tamariki, so often they take the easy road and they'll look for somebody that they know who is usually outside of kin, and they'll say, well, put that child there right now. And what we're saying is no. Do not separate the children from their kin, but certainly look for kin that can be held accountable by the rest of the family. That's the other thing, by the rest of the family. So and of course, as you know, the Royal Commission that looked into the abuse of state care, my God, I sat in on some of those hearings, and the treatment of the children was shocking. So I want that place to be disestablished. I think there's no room now for an organisation like that. There are good community providers, whether they are iwi providers, there are other providers that can pick up on some pieces of that work and actually run with it. But I don't want to see children separated from their families. I do want to see the abuse to children stopped, absolutely. I want the families to know that they have to be held accountable, but I want somebody in that family who's trusted to come forward and say, this is my mokopuna, this is my future, my responsibility, I'm here. And that's what we have, that's the message that we have to get out as well to our families too.
I understand that, but I guess the families you're talking about, the whānau you're talking about, in many cases they're generationally dysfunctional. So the idea of finding a responsible whānau member who is suddenly going to take on all of the social ills of that whānau is A, good luck on finding them, and then B, that's just ridiculously responsible, because you might have this 70-year-old who's woman that's responsible, but the rest of the family's gone mad and they're on meth and they're abusing their children. Isn't there always a place for the state to intervene when children are threatened by their family situation?
Well, I think you know as well as I do, Michael, in the last 20 years there's been about 15 reports on the services provided by Oranga Tamariki that have said that they're not getting it right. They don't do it right. They've got people in there that have come from a culture that was not conducive to actually helping the children, and not only that, helping the whānau as well. So it's everything. It's the whole thing that has to be looked at. Yes, the children must be safe. That goes without saying. But then you've got to make sure that at the same time we're working with the whānau, with the families, because at some stage those children are going to go back into that whānau situation, and if nothing's changed, then nothing has changed. And that is the saddest thing. We don't put effort into the families as well, and I think that's one of the crucial things that we have to stop. But it does take good leadership. It takes families to call out other family members, and they don't do that. They shy away from that. And, you know, sometimes you've got to say, listen, my mokapuna's life is more important than you getting up on your high horse and saying, oh, we'll sort this out behind closed doors. Bugger that. That never happens. I can tell you that.
No, you're right. You're right. Merepeka, thank you very much for talking. I enjoyed talking to you again today. If you don't mind, we'll check in, see how your campaign's going a bit later on. And Rotorua, the National Party candidate, I think, is Macleay, Roger Macleay's.
Todd Macleay.
That's right.
That's right.
He is the current Member of Parliament, yes?
That's right. Yes, he is. Yes.
And the Labour candidate is?
Oh, yes, Ben Sanford.
Right, okay.
Nice guy.
Right. But at the moment, you'd have to say that Macleay will probably be re-elected. Are you getting a response from locals that might see you get close?
Yes, indeed I am. For some reason, some people think I've already been in Parliament for years, for goodness sake. Well, I haven't been in Parliament for years, but no, it is. And I'm on the ground. This is the thing. I mean, you know, I'm on the ground. I'm hearing what people are saying. I know they're concerned about the issues. Certainly the last few years we've done it tough in Rotorua, and you have got... I mean, there are government agencies, I think, in Rotorua that could be doing more. Actually, they should be doing more. And they think, oh, it's business as usual. Hell no. You know, the scene has changed. The world has changed. New Zealand has changed. And Rotorua certainly has changed. And so we need to make sure that we're getting back on track as soon as possible. But I actually believe, Michael, it's going to take 10 years. 10 years of hard graft. And that's what's ahead of us.
Well, at least. Thank you very much for joining us. Talk to you soon. And have a good rest of the week, Merepeka.
Thank you, Michael. Loved our kōrero.
Okay, nice to talk to you too. There you go. Now, I'm sure, and already I don't even need to look at my text, there will be people there who say, what on earth are you doing interviewing? Seriously, we are the platform. So we interview everybody, and on this show in particular. And if you don't like, you have the opportunity to call in. 0800 33 22 883 and respond to what Merepeka was saying. Can I say to you just quietly, though, you're talking to a Conservative woman there. It's an interesting juxtaposition to me. Very interesting juxtaposition, just quietly, as to Merepeka being there. She's number 8 on the list. She was number 7, I think, in 2020. But there you go. Wouldn't you prefer to have her in just quietly than somebody like, oh, I don't know, Ona Harawira? Just saying.